Coming up on today's episode of the Money Pants Podcast, part 2 of what to do with satanic grandparents. This podcast turned out to be much longer than we originally thought. We'll keep discussing the importance of getting gifts under control, especially when it comes to grandparents. But first, the joke of the day.
My grandfather tried to warn everyone that the Titanic was going to sink. When everyone just ignored him, he yelled at them 3 more times. Eventually, they got irritated and just kicked him out of the theater. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Money Pants Podcast. We are your hosts, Hannah and Fontaine Judd, and we're the proud parents of 7 sons and 6 daughters, ranging in age from college student to toddler. We're both BYU graduates and the creators of Money Pants. Head on over to CaptainMoneyPants.com to learn more about what we do and what we're all about. We're on a mission to support families who are trying to raise hardworking kids and to combat the current trend of entitlement. Today's topic is part 2 of gifts and grandparents. In part 1, we talked about how to deal with people who give your family and kids gifts. In this podcast, we're just going to pick up right where we left off, and we're going to focus in on how to deal with grandparents and gift giving.
Yeah,
and they are notorious gift givers.
Yeah, but and there's a different relationship there. They're your parents.
Yeah. Or
They're
your spouse
your parents,
or your spouse's
and
parents.
So
yeah.
There's a very deep relationship there, and these are their grandchildren. So they do have a sense of ownership
Absolutely.
and control.
Absolutely.
And so all of a sudden you're in a different territory.
But not only that, typically grandparents are more affluent. They're in their later stages of life. They have more leisure time. They also have more, they have more money to spend.
At least in our current generation, right. That's how it is for a lot of grandparents.
And they feel that it's their duty to spoil the grandchildren. It's the parents' duty to raise them and the grandparents' duty to spoil them.
And they joke about it, but that's exactly what they like to do.
So we've noticed, though, that sometimes, not always, but sometimes grandparents kind of overdo it. We had that friend in L.A. Well, Tia had her best friend.
Well, take my parents. My parents have 50 grandchildren. Guess what? They can't spoil their grandchildren. I'm impressed my mom sends a card with a little bit of money for their birthdays.
I'm impressed she remembers.
And she remembers. She remembers better than I do. I don't know how she does.
Wait, it's Caleb's birthday? Dang it.
We just got a card from Grandma Joan. Whose birthday is it? But she can't because she has a lot of grandchildren. It's kind of like if you have a big family, yeah, you're probably not spoiling your kids because you can't. So, but same concept. But, like we had a friend who her husband was an only child. And then she had one daughter at the time, only one daughter. And so it was the only grandchild and the only grandchild that ever was going to be for her husband's parents. And my friend and her husband, they weren't well off, but their child had every toy, every piece of clothing, every
Barbie,
art supply, every castle,
every dollhouse, every bounce
slide,
house thingy,
bounce house, everything you
trampoline.
Could possibly imagine having
she was
as
basically
a child.
She was basically a Toys R Us in her home.
Yes, and they didn't live close to the grandparents. They were quite far away. It was, you may be in that situation where you're inundated with presents from the grandparents. And so you're trying to teach your child to appreciate the things they have, work for the things they have, and this could undermine those plans. Now, my friend, her daughter was a sweetheart. She really was. She
was awesome.
She had a personality where she was just kind of a carefree person and just very fun and loving. She was my daughter's best friend.
She was sincere.
And very sincere. And that was just who she was.
And so all these gifts lavishing on her, she actually was not entitled.
Yeah, I don't think she had any concept of what they were worth.
No, I don't think she appreciated them, but even then she took pretty good care of them. She didn't break them. She wasn't destructive. She was respectful. She was a good girl.
She was a good girl. Yeah, she really was. So you're like, yeah.
But I also think she's kind of the exception.
Yeah, she may be the exception. But even so, your kid may be the exception where they're not a bad kid, even though they have all this stuff.
But we're suggesting it could have been so much better for her, where instead of just giving her these things, why not reserve them until she's done her piano lessons, or she's improved her grades in school, or she's finished her art project, or she's developed a certain talent, or developed a certain skill set, or whatever, where they could have leveraged
or
those
gotten her
toys.
chores done, or something
they could have
like
leveraged
that.
and it helped her that much more.
And honestly, I don't know if she did chores at all, or like was a hard worker. I don't know that about her at all. So I can't make a comment about that, but I'm just saying, yeah, my friend wasn't in a good financial position, but those gifts from the grandparents, they could have been used as a motivator for a daughter.
Right.
She could have gotten more.
The grandparents could have got more out of it. They could have got a better granddaughter rather than just a granddaughter who has a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So, but that brings up a good point. Like when you're dealing with the grandparents, you need to remember they're still your children. And this is not uncommon. Like you just need to remember it's still your child, and you're not alone in this, because a lot of people have grandparents that want to intervene, and that's normal and that's healthy and that's good. But we've kind of broken it down into, there are really 3 different types of grandparents that we want to talk about today, where when it comes to getting gifts from the grandparents, there are kind of 3. I mean, there's obviously there's all different types of grandparents with different motives and different relationships, but we've broken it down to kind of 3 main groups of grandparents
that we're going to focus on today.
There are the grandparents who want to help you out. You, the parents, the grandparents want to help the parents out in any way they can, any way, shape, or form. They just want to help out. Then there's the second, where they are rescuing, or they know better, or they don't quite care for your parenting style, where they're kind of a little meddling almost. And I think I'm not going to say most, but I would say a lot of grandparents fall into that category.
They cross into that line,
Yeah,
even though they're kind of in between the 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Where sometimes they cross over.
And then there's the third group, where they're actively trying to sabotage what you as the parent are doing. That maybe they hate you, or your spouse, or your kids, or your parenting style, or that you're a Democrat or a Republican. I don't know. But they
might hate your religion
for whatever reason.
They
They hate that you're Jewish or Catholic or Presbyterian or whatever. They hate
your race.
Maybe you're a white woman who married a black guy, or maybe you're a Catholic who married a Jewish guy, and they just hate that. It doesn't matter. They're actively trying to sabotage your relationship with your kids. So those are the 3 groups. The ones that are trying to help out, then the ones that are kind of meddling, and then the ones that are actively trying to sabotage what you're trying to do. And you'll explain, you'll understand why we broke it down into those 3 groups. I'll explain that in a minute. But basically, the reason I broke it down into the 3 groups is because how you deal with each one. So let's talk about that first group, the grandparents that want to help out. They're the easiest ones to deal with.
Yeah, because if you tell them what you need, that's what they'll do.
You say, you know what?
This would help me the most.
I want my kids to work for what they get. And here's some of the things they're working towards. We love the gifts. Thank you so much. Can you focus your gift giving on these areas? And the grandparents would be like, oh yeah, didn't know. Thanks. Great. We'll do that.
Yeah.
They need help with paying for their costume for dance, or for the performance fee, or they need help with football because they can't afford the registration, or they're using old cleats so they just can't afford new ones, or whatever. The grandparents are like, oh yeah, I can help out.
Well, kind of like our daughters wanted to do cheerleading, and there was no way possible that our family could afford
it was more expensive than football.
Yeah,
it was more expensive than football.
To do cheerleading, and they wanted to do it, and so the only way they could do it is if a grandparent stepped
Grandma or grandpa sponsored
and
them,
said, "Hey, would you pay the $700 and they'll pay the $300?"
Mm-hmm.
Could we didn't want them paying the whole thing, but
what our family budget couldn't afford, they would step in and kind of fill in the gap.
And so if you have grandparents who are always willing and looking for ways to help out, the best thing to do is to communicate with what you do want.
And these are the grandparents that respond.
And what you're trying to do. And
the grandparents in this first group respond accordingly.
And a lot of times they bring more to the table and go, well, what if we did this? And they'll bring ideas that support what you're trying to do. And that is
a dream.
If you have grandparents like that, you are
Thank your lucky stars.
Just be grateful for that. That is such a blessing, where you're very blessed to have that situation.
But
it's
at the same time, though, again, we don't recommend your kids get stuff for free. That's not what we're saying.
Yeah.
We're saying, though, get the grandparents on board. And if they live nearby, say, hey, Can Sally, if you're going to pay for her soccer, can she come mow the lawn or help you with the ironing or in the garden or with dusting?
Yeah, once a week. Can she come over? And then they would love that.
Because then they get to spend more time with their grandkids. And
they're getting help.
And they're watching their grandchildren develop their talents and develop work ethic. And it's just, those grandparents will be on board.
Yeah, and if they are awesome grandparents, that's like having your kid work with them and spend time with them. They'll pick up on some of the values and it will reinforce good things.
And this multi-generational reinforcement of the values you're trying to teach your children.
Not everybody has that situation.
Oh, we'll get there.
Yeah,
we'll get there.
But if you have that situation, take advantage of that and just... This will totally work for you.
Now, if the grandparents are long distance and you can't actually have that work relationship, then another option is say, you know what, Grandma and Grandpa, we know you want to spend money on your grandchild. They really want to do dance. They can't pay you back. Would it be okay if you just deposited the money into their bank account? And then what we'll do is we will set up a mastery reward for them achieving a certain milestone for them to unlock that cash that you've given them.
Yeah, like say, okay, my daughter, she's really struggling in math, and a lot of times she's not turning in her math homework. And so can we tell her, hey, Grandma has offered to pay for ballet classes for you if you can go 8 weeks of turning in your math homework.
So 8 mastery points.
Without missing. Mm-hmm. Grandma says she'll do this for you. And so your mom or dad, they're gonna go, oh yeah, because not only are they giving this gift, but they're helping their grandchild overcome a fear that they had. Mm-hmm. And helping them achieve something. And so if they're smart, they'll go, oh yeah, that's even better than
me just giving them
gifts. This
because
is awesome.
Good grandparents want their grandkids to be good people.
Yeah, and 3 months later, when little Sally's grade's gone from a C to an A or an A minus or a B plus, it goes up. The grandparents had a part in that.
And they feel that sense of pride knowing that they've contributed because they live a long way away, maybe.
Yeah.
They're across the country, but they get the phone call from Sally saying, hey, Mom, Grandma and Grandpa, guess what?
My report card.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
How cool is that?
Yeah, and so what grandparent wouldn't like that? Wouldn't like to participate?
The grandparents of group 1 would like that.
Yeah, or like let's say you're doing a piano class or something, and it works off of levels, and because some piano teachers have it really organized, and where you have to achieve certain levels, and you're in competitions, and you have to pass off certain levels. Hey, if she can pass off this level, you'll buy her that new piano.
Oh,
or
right.
Or something that the grandparent was like, oh, she likes piano, I want to get her a new piano, or I want to get her this. Say, how about if she practices every day, if she can achieve, she's on level 1, but she's missing her practicing a lot, so she's not really progressing. Mm-hmm. If she can get up to level 4 by next year,
or if she can achieve 16 mastery points or whatever,
then get her.
So and you get the kid on the phone with Grandma and Grandpa, and Grandma and Grandpa say, hey, I was talking to your mom and dad. So now it's already gone. The gift has gone through Mom and Dad.
Mom and Dad are on board with this.
Now, I was talking to your mom and dad, and we've agreed. That Steinway that you've been eyeing that you want, or that, keyboard or that guitar, whatever. That Steinway that you've been really wanting? Well, we've decided if you can get to you get 16 mastery points, or if you can get to level 4 on your, whatever, piano lessons, Grandma and Grandpa, we're going to buy you that piano. What do you think? And little Johnny's going to be like, wow, that's the greatest thing ever. Okay, I'll practice every day. I won't miss a day. And then the grandparents can call and follow up to see how he's doing. And again, you got that social reinforcement, and it works really well.
Yeah.
And it's amazing and wonderful and fantastic. And did you have something?
Well, no, I'm just saying, I just wanted to say, there are other situations too, where a lot of times grandparents, when their car gets old and it's no longer under warranty, they want to get another car. Mm-hmm. But instead of selling the car, they don't want to sell the car. They want to give it to
one of
their grandchildren.
One of the grandkids, sure.
One of their grandchildren. And so...
Because they're teenagers, they're learning to drive.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Why don't we just give this to Billy? He's turning 16 and something like that. And so what would be better is if you talk to him and say, you know what, Billy's working on getting his Eagle Scout. Or could you make that a graduation gift if they can maintain above a
4.0 or 3.5 or whatever.
3.5, and just an extra motivator, and that would help him get into a good college, and that would really help him out a lot. Or let's say you have a teenager that's on drugs, and is battling like a drug or alcohol addiction.
Some sort of addiction, sure.
And they've shown that, if they have rewards set up for every week that they go by that they pass their addiction, or they pass with a screening or whatever,
sure,
where they're clean for a week.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you can go 3 months
right.
being clean,
12 weeks or whatever. Yeah,
Grandma and Grandpa said you can have this car, or something like that, where you're like, hey, this is what they're working on. This is what we're nervous about for them. If you could instead use that to help them achieve that would mean so much to me. A good grandparent will be all about that.
Now, but I think the whole point, and we're not saying not to give your kids things and not to let people give your kids gifts. The whole point is to get away from this entitlement mentality and to get our kids to learn to work, but also to appreciate the things that they have. So kids should not think the world owes them things just because they're alive. That's a really bad mentality, like really bad. Because if a person were alive by themselves in the middle of the desert doesn't care if you're alive or not. It's not going to give you water and a fresh meal and a nice bed. Mm-hmm. That's not how the world works. Well, that's not reality.
You want to teach your kids to work for the things that they get, to get away from a gambling. That's the spiritual principle underneath what you're trying to teach your kids, is the principle you need to work for the things that you get. Today I went out to lunch with my son Blackstone, and we were near a fountain, and there were coins in the fountain, and he asked me, Mom, there's a quarter there's dimes, and can I reach in there and grab up all this money? And I said, no, Blackstone, you should work for the things that you get. Let's leave that there for poor people who don't have enough money. And he's like, well, we're poor, because we're paying off some debts from the past couple years or whatever. And he's like, we're poor. I said, we have food to eat. And
we have a home to live in.
You have the ability to earn that.
We drove here in a car.
Yeah, we drove here in a car. He said, you know what? No, we're not poor. People who even though they're working or they can't get work, those are the people who will save, can come dig in the fountain and save that money for them.
Well, no, but you bring up a good point. We truly believe kids deserve what they earn, and they'll appreciate it more.
Yeah.
And like you just said, we already give. He says he thinks we're poor, but he's getting a ton of free stuff. Housing, food, bed, bedding, mattress, electricity, water heaters, indoor plumbing, healthcare and education, air conditioning, heating, a yard, pool, a car with gas that has air conditioning in it, soft seats,
medical care. Yeah, it's just
we're suggesting having our kids buy a small amount of things that they were getting for free before. Not everything, but just a small amount. Some of that discretionary money, let your kids earn it. And to combat that trend of entitlement, which leads right into group number 2 that we wanted to talk about, which is the grandparents that kind of disagree with what you're doing and don't necessarily support you as the parent, where you had this experience with, I don't want to throw your grandparents under the bus, but your Grandpa Jack didn't agree with your parents' decision to not have a TV.
Yeah, so he would always criticize my mom because my mom and dad did not want us watching TV. We would watch movies.
You had a TV. You just didn't have cable.
Yeah, we would watch TV.
You didn't have cable.
We didn't have cable TV.
Your parents were so neglectful. You didn't have cable TV.
Oh, and he thought, your kid, and he would tell my mom, your kids aren't going to develop social skills. They're not going to, know what's going on in the world. They're going to be so lost socially. And so every time he would come to visit, he would bring a giant box of VHS tapes of TV that he had recorded with the commercials and everything.
To give you guys a good taste of what was going on in the world.
Yeah, to give us a taste of culture.
TV, 80s TV is so full of culture.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes he would record a circus. I don't know it. I don't know.
Random, just random.
You know, and my mom would kind of grit her teeth and smile, thank you, you know, but she didn't really know what to do about that. If I were her, I would have just thrown the whole box in the garbage after he left.
Well, no, but then, now this was another family member. No, this is a friend you had it was like your car, the car that you got.
Oh, yeah. My grandparents, were like, hey, here's a car for the kids.
Right.
And I had the sense of going, I'm going to pay you for that. I don't know. Well, I do know why I did that, because I wanted the car to be mine.
Right.
I wanted to have ownership of the car.
But you had another relative who gave somebody a car and then years later asked for it back. Remember that?
Right.
So
yes.
Again, if you pay for it, it's yours. There's no control, and those strings are cut.
And for some, it was very strong with me. No, I want to pay for this car, and I had
but you were
$500.
$35. You were 35 years old at the time, right?
No, I was 17, 18.
So you knew inherently. I think everybody does. I think everybody inherently knows.
No,
you should pay for what you get.
I want the car to be mine.
Yes.
And so
I think everybody inherently understands that concept.
Anyway.
But then you had a family friend though, who.
So in another situation, I had a friend who went through a nasty divorce when she was just married, and she ended up soon after her marriage. They had a baby, and soon thereafter, she went back and lived with her parents.
Because she had no income, she didn't have a way to support herself.
Yeah, and she was emotionally really struggling. And her son had, I think he had some mental health issues.
Was it Asperger's or?
I don't remember.
Something like that, though.
I think
some mental problems.
Some mental health issues. And the grandparents, her parents, doted on her son and would just let him do whatever he wanted and would give him, would cater to anything he ever wanted.
Partially because they probably felt sorry for him, but also it was their grandchild and they wanted to make sure he was okay.
And so they were very loving grandparents, but it
taught the wrong lessons.
It taught the wrong lessons. So even though this child had mental health issues,
it kind of exacerbated it.
It kind of made it worse because they would, if he said it was Sunday and it was Monday, they would go, yeah, it's Sunday. They would just, it was to that degree where, whatever you think it is, whatever you want, that's what it is.
But then
even if it wasn't true. But
didn't the mom finally move out though?
Well, finally, the mom went through some bad relationships, but she finally got into a good relationship, got married, and ended up moving halfway across the country. And she took her son, who was then probably high school, junior high age, away from this situation. And even though he had all these challenges in school and everything like that, once they moved away, she became pretty hopeful because he started taking a lot more responsibility. And even though he didn't go to college, he ended up getting a job and keeping a job. And that was a big deal for this kid. That was a huge step in the right direction. And the mom was just so grateful and felt so hopeful of, hey, my son, he's progressing.
Things are going to work out. He's going to be okay.
He's going to be okay. Yeah. He can do this, and he is doing it. Well, she began having health issues with the area she was living in, and so she moved back to the same state where her parents were. Because they were in close proximity again with the parents, what ended up happening is her son followed them, and then he went right back to living with the grandparents.
No.
Yeah, and he...
and I bet he reverted to
all the way back to just...
being a junior high student.
Where he didn't get a job and just had nothing to do all day and just was just kind of wasting his life. And it wasn't in his best interest, but his grandparents were like, oh no, you can come live with us. You can come live with us. But it wasn't actually in what was good for him.
And that's kind of what we're talking about when we talk about this second group is that the grandparents aren't really on board with the
Yeah,
parents.
They're like, we're not going to turn him out. We're not
and
going to.
they're not even necessarily doing what's best for the grandkids.
Yeah,
And
but
it may be misguided. And there's all sorts of different motivations.
These were very loving grandparents.
Right.
But they were overriding what the mom's feelings. And they were overriding, they weren't looking at what was best for
the boy,
their grandson.
Yeah. Well, no, and then you were at the store the other day, and some lady said almost the exact same thing, right? That some lady was like, random. She's like, my friend.
Yeah, the cashier. I'm getting conversations with people. She's like, yeah, my sister, she's trying to raise her son, or it may have been her own son, and the grandparents were just like, didn't think she knew what she was doing, and they were overriding it and just giving the kid whatever they wanted.
Which is infuriating because the grandparents can, because they have the money. Maybe the parents don't.
Yeah, and the mom felt like, they're ruining my kid. But she didn't know what to do to stop it, because she was kind of in a stuck place where she couldn't move away, and she didn't want to destroy the relationship with her parents. Right. But she's like, this isn't in the best interest of my child.
So what do you do? These are the kind of the challenging grandparents. So what do you do with that?
Yeah.
And I think we came up, some pretty good ideas. First of all, you got to set up some boundaries. You have to explain and set up and stick to some boundaries with the grandparents. Because, and again, we said this before, they're your kids. Grandparents, you had your chance. Now it's my turn. And maybe you need to say that in a loving, kind way. Say, you know what?
Mom, Dad,
I appreciate what you're trying to do.
You had your chance.
Yeah, look what you ended up with.
Look what you did.
Now it's my turn. It is my turn.
It's my turn. Back off.
So, but then you also need to get the kids on board and say, hey, you know what? When Grandma and Grandpa give you something, we're going to smile. And we're going to say thanks.
So we don't hurt their feelings.
And then it's going to go into your prize bag for you to earn.
Yeah.
Isn't that great? You're going to, Grandma and Grandpa, they want to give you so many things, and we want you to have those things. So we're just going to put it in your prize bag.
Yeah, but it's important that you learn to work for them.
And then,
and so that's what we're going to do.
And then you tell the grandparents something like, you know, we really appreciate the gifts, but we are really trying to teach our kids to earn what they get. And we would like your support on this, please. But if that's a problem, then we're going to have to nix the gifts. We're going to have to say no more gifts.
Yeah, so you could approach it that way.
We'll just enjoy your company, and we'll call it good.
So another thing that you can try is you can say, if they're just overriding you and just ignoring you in your requests,
and continue to
because
gift your
that's
kids.
Kind of what was happening with the one girl that I described. You can say to them, you know what, Mom and Dad, we actually have too much stuff, and I'm having to throw away a lot of stuff and donate it, and it's actually kind of overwhelming. Instead of as stuff, if this Christmas or this birthday, could you instead give us passes to the zoo or passes to the water park? That's not something we can afford, but I know that
it would mean a lot to
it would
the
mean
grandkids.
A lot, and we'd get to spend more time together as a family and go do things, and I think they would like that better than toys. Now, here's the benefit to that. If you have a season pass to Disneyland or you have a season pass to the water park, you can go every weekend, but it's back in your control.
Right.
Because you can say, hey, you know what? If everybody gets their jobs done and their Saturday jobs done, we'll go to the water
World,
park.
whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. If you get all your homework turned in, for the next couple months, we'll go to Disneyland. We'll make that trip out there and buy the food and pay for the gas and, but it puts it back into your hands.
And your control.
And where your kids are back to earning it. And so
those are kind of the two strategies that we came up with where, get the kids and try to reason with the grandparents and say, hey, you know what?
But sometimes, yes. But in this group of grandparents, they might not. It's the group that doesn't really respect you.
Right.
Or thinks they know better.
And so maybe these aren't threats, but they're more just setting up boundaries.
Say, we don't want more stuff.
Yeah. And any stuff that we get, unfortunately, we just have to donate or sell at garage sales. We don't have room.
You'd seen our apartment. It's too small.
Exactly.
Yeah. And just go about it that way.
But if you really wanted to give us gifts, and again, you're playing on the grandparents' wish to give the kids gifts, say, you know what? do the water park passes.
Really would like
Yeah,
that.
Billy, Sally, and Johnny, they love Wet and Wild.
Or passes to the state parks. We love to go camping.
Or the Exploratorium, or whatever.
And these are things we can't afford. You know?
And so you're feeding on the grandparents'
and you're
desire
giving them,
to show they're superior, maybe?
Yeah, directing their ideas to where it would be back in your control. Because that's not something...
But you're still placating the grandparents.
Yeah.
So
that's a tactic you can use in that situation. Like I said, these aren't bad grandparents. They do love you, and they do love their grand...
They're not supporting
but
you, what you're trying to do.
They don't... Either they don't understand, or they just don't think you're right.
Yeah. And that's going to happen. That will happen. That's just how it is.
So, yeah.
But then there's the third group of grandparents. And these are the ones... we call the satanic grandparents, where grandma and grandpa have horns and red faces, where they are actively trying to sabotage everything you're trying to do.
Yeah. And
this group has a whole bunch of different motives. We've seen it, where maybe they're trying to pit the grandkids against each other. Or maybe they're trying to pit the parents against the kids. Or
the parents against each other.
Or trying to get revenge against their son or daughter-in-law. Or maybe there are so many, or they just don't for whatever reason, they hate you. That just, for whatever reason. Then they have all these different motives.
This isn't a make-believe thing. And unfortunately, it is more common than it should be.
And if you've never seen this and don't have this experience, count your lucky stars and move on, because there are plenty of people who do have this scenario to deal with. And these are toxic grandparents. There's no other term for it because...
Well, satanic.
Right. There is another term for it. Satanic. That we know of a couple who the mother-in-law absolutely hated her son-in-law.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So like every time they had when this woman's daughter had a baby, her daughter would call her and say, "Hey, Mom, will you come help out?"
Right. Which is a normal thing to ask for for your mom, right?
Instead of helping out, the mom would purposely cause trouble, like clog the toilet so that her son-in-law would have to mess with the poop and unclog it. But she would do it on purpose.
That's disgusting.
It is. It was disgusting.
And childish.
Yes. But she would just do things to get at her son-in-law.
No, but what really irked me.
But then the thing that the first time she came, a couple weeks later, Child Protective Services showed up at their door over some petty thing, and it was random and out of the blue, and it really weirded these people out. Mm-hmm. And then the next time she had a baby, she called her mother-in-law over.
No, her mother.
The girl calls her mother to come help her out. But a couple weeks later, Child Protective Services shows up at her door with another petty thing. And
one of the sockets didn't have a plug in it or something.
Yeah.
One of those protective coverings.
And if you're a parent, that's not something you take lightly. You can get your kids taken away from you. You end up with a permanent record, and then if something does happen and then they have these calls on file that it's been reported multiple times that you're a bad parent, you've got a serious that's not funny. That's not funny. That's not something you play around with.
Well, like I said, Hannah, these are toxic satanic.
Yeah, these are toxic satanic grandparents that we're
trying
talking
to get your kids
about.
Taken away from you. And it happened multiple, 3 times?
Yeah,
3-4
they're
times?
thinking, oh, we'll get the kids. I don't know what they're thinking, but
this lady called CPS on her own child.
Because she was being petty.
Because she didn't like her son-in-law. Yeah. So we only have one solution for these types of people. This third group of grandparents, we think there's really just one solution, and that is to invest in a tranquilizer gun. No, I'm just kidding. The solution that we've come up with really is to move. Where physical distance is really the best when you're off their radar and you're not, and your kids aren't nearby and you're not nearby.
Your kids don't know them. It's better.
It's okay. To cut ties is really sad. It is really sad to cut ties with your parents.
Well, sometimes your parents aren't going to be good influences on your children.
But it's
sometimes you don't have good parents.
In this situation, Hannah, that you were just describing with your friend, I can't think of a better solution than to cut ties completely, because otherwise they were going to lose their children.
Yeah, you have to decide. Basically, they're forcing you into a situation of you can decide between keeping your children or
having
keeping a relationship with me, who I'd hate you.
Yeah.
And so it's like you've taken these are extreme choices I'm presented with here, but I'm going to choose keep my children.
But these are kind of extreme people, and that's why we call them, the toxic grandparents, where you just, unfortunately, you just kind of have to cut ties and say, man, that stinks. Well, maybe the other grandparents are better.
So
hopefully they're not all bad.
We knew another couple who there was not a good relationship between the grandparents and their children, and they were trying to pit the family members against each other, where it was, oh, you're invited to our house, but your parents aren't. Or you're,
Or these 3 children are, but the other 3 children aren't.
And if they knew that the parents had a rule, they would purposely, we don't want our kids to drink or be around alcohol. They would purposely
serve alcohol
and try to get the kids to drink. And, things like that, where there was a bad relationship. But unfortunately, the grandparents lived right close by, like in walking distance.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, there was a constant threat.
There was a constant threat.
That anytime the parents did something the kids didn't like, the kids would just run off to Grandma and Grandpa's. And Grandma and Grandpa would give them whatever they wanted to spite the parents.
Toxic.
Truly toxic people.
Where you'd be better off not knowing them and not being near them, not having anything to do with them.
And it's hard.
But you have this idea, the grandparents are going to instill good values in my children. They're going to help me. They're going to support me.
That's what you hope.
That's the ideal. But if the opposite's happening, where they're trying to break up your marriage, override your parental authority or what's best for your children, and pit your children against you, you don't really have a choice but to distance yourself.
Yeah. And that is actually best for you and your children.
And that's sad, and you should be sad about it, because great, those are my parents. Seriously, that they're supposed to be grandparents. They're supposed to be my mom and dad.
And they're not.
Yeah.
And it's difficult. It's really and you're kind of alone. And that, again, hope that maybe the other grandparents are better.
Yeah, but if not, guess what? Those kids are yours. And
they're
you get to make your own decisions.
And they're your responsibility, though.
And when you have grandchildren, you can be the type of grandparent you want to be. Yeah. That choice is yours. But you don't have a choice who your parents are. You really don't. All you have the choice of is what you're going to do. And
the only other thing I would say about that is the sooner you cut ties, the better.
Yeah.
And you know what? There may be some miraculous change where one of the grandparents that was the toxic one passes away, or maybe they both have a sudden change of heart or whatever. Then you can try again. But if they are actively being toxic and overriding and trying to destroy,
purposely trying to undermine or destroy, destroy.
I think destroy is probably the best term. Yeah. That's when you need to cut ties and just move on and do it.
I can think of more extreme examples.
The sooner the better.
I can think of more extreme examples.
Yeah, we're not going to go there, but
we're not going to go there.
We have actually seen this. This is not
make believe. This isn't.
Yeah, these aren't fake. These aren't makeup. These aren't made up stories. So, just to kind of recap, when it comes to receiving gifts from the grandparents and why they do it, we broke it down into 3 groups. And the reason we broke it down into 3 groups is the way you deal with it. For the first group of grandparents that just want to help out and whatever you need, it's really easy.
Let them know what you need.
Say, you know what, the gifts, whatever the gift problem is that's going on, this is actually what we're trying to do. Get the grandparents, tell them what's going on.
I'd rather you did this. Yeah, just point them to what you do want, and
they'll
be there.
Whereas the second group, where they're maybe rescuing or undermining you or just disagree with you, for them, you really need to set up some boundaries. You need to say, okay, this is what's working. This is what we're willing to do. if this doesn't happen, then this is what we're going to do. Just set up these boundaries
We're
for
not
them.
accepting gifts anymore because we have too much stuff.
Right.
You know.
Or we really appreciate the gifts, but any gifts you give us are going to go to our children, blah, 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 into their prize bag so they can earn them.
And for safety reasons, all gifts have to go through us. And
that's it's hard to argue that.
Yeah.
For safety reasons, all the gifts have to go through us, the parents. And then the last one, the last group, the third group, the openly antagonistic or trying to sabotage those grandparents, you got to cut ties. And if you think this doesn't exist, be grateful because it does. If it doesn't exist in your life, be grateful because it actually does exist in other people's lives. And that's it. Those are all the thoughts we had when it comes to gifts and dealing with gifts from neighbors, friends, relatives, coworkers, and also particularly grandparents. It's a meaty topic. We'll revisit this in the future when it comes to other ways to deal with the grandparents. But for now, I think that's good. We've hopefully given you some ideas on what to do and kind of shared with you some of our mistakes that maybe we've made and things to avoid.
Every topic here, we've we've done that. We've done that wrong.
Don't do what we've done.
Yeah. You can avoid that.
Now, if you like what you hear in our podcast, please tell your friends. They might want to listen too. And if you have a suggestion for a future podcast, please go to our website, go to support, and under contact us, send us an email. And we'll jump right on.
Yeah, and also we put out suggestions of what to do in these different situations. There are more ideas out there, and if you have them,
we'd love to hear them.
Yeah, you can leave comments below because the objective of our blogs and our website is to support other parents who are trying to achieve these types of goals. So if you have ideas or experiences or things that would be helpful to other parents, leave your comments because you don't know who that is going to help. And so yeah, we encourage you to, if this sparked ideas in your mind or you've had this experience and you found something
or we missed something,
add it in because it's going to become part of the website and part of the resource.
And that's it for today. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy some Falcon Jasper magical music. We'll see you next time.